All right. So what we're going to be looking at today is how we figure out how to get started with this final game project that we have facing us. Um, I start off any project that I'm working on with a blank piece of paper or a blank document in this case, so that I can start, getting my ideas out there. So I don't have to worry about trying to remember everything on my own. I just have to refer back to my list of ideas. And that's a good thing for you guys to do too, is to take notes and try and, have those ideas in a concrete location so that you can then always refer back to it, and you can always get connected with those original ideas. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to our assignments. Um, this is where the assignment actually comes from here in Google Classroom, and we're looking at our final game. Now you can see that we have 5 different parts that go to our game. It's the mood board, the rules and instructions, play tester feedback, the game itself, and your personal reflection. So this is actually a good process to start at the beginning so that when it comes time to write that personal reflection at the end of your project, you have all these notes to kind of refer back to as well. So within each of these, it kind of talks about what's required for each one. There's, a little bit about each piece, just kind of as a review of what we're looking for. For the playtester feedback portion, there's some sample questions. For the game itself, here are the pieces you need to actually do. And for your reflection, here's some starter questions to kind of get a sense of what it is that you need to include in your reflection to make it meaningful and complete. But what we're going to do right now is I'm going to start by writing down each of the 5 pieces over in our document window here. So first, we have our mood board. Then we have our rules and instructions. Then we have the actual development part of the process. So prototyping. If you're doing a board game or a card game, you're actually making the prototype, or development. So if you're coding. And then once you do that, you have some play testers, and you're going to get some feedback from them. And the 5th part is to reflect. So have your reflection. And so I write those down just as a reminder to myself of what's required for this project. And so I can start addressing each one at a time. But really, before you get to even any of these, there is actually another number 1 that you have to add. And that is, you have to come up with the idea. I mean, that's really the thing that has to be at the first step of the way, so that you know what to expect, you know what you're shooting for. This is where you come up with the idea based on who your audience is going to be. There's that phrase, begin with the end in mind, and that basically means that if you have a goal in mind, then it's easy to work towards that goal and make sure that everything you do is also working towards that goal and serving that purpose. And so with this one, I have already thought about this a little bit, so I have an idea in mind. And I'm coming up with an idea based on a handful of things. So one, certainly what would be fun to make, what would be fun for me to play, what do I think other people would want to play, but also understanding, who you are and what your capabilities are is super important as well, because you're not going to be in a place right now to start developing something that is super polished and commercial ready, right? Nobody here is going to be making the next big craze in gaming like Fortnite within the next 3 weeks, right? I think that's pretty fair. We have 3 weeks to create this, and that's not what's going to be coming out in 3 weeks. So think about realistically where you're at. I know that putting myself in your shoes, okay, just starting out, okay, we've done Pong, we've done like a shooter game, we've done mazes, You guys have looked at other videos here and there. We've seen all of these different types of games and have had some experience with them. We've started coding a little bit here and there, that we can kind of get a sense of how to do certain types of movements and interactivity. So think about what you've done so far and what you think you're capable of. And so pulling those ideas together, I start thinking about something that I used to play as a kid that kind of fits into um, those categories. And the one I came up with is Space Invaders. Now, Space Invaders is pretty straightforward. I'm sure everybody's at least seen it in some way if they're not as aware, but you have a spaceship that you're controlling at the bottom, just slides back and forth, kind of like Pong, right? That we know how to make those movements happen. And it's shooting out lasers, blasters, whatever you want to call them, just like in the zombie game. So we know how to make those work. And then you have a series of aliens or alien spaceships that are slowly inching their way down the screen, and you have to destroy them before they get to you. So a lot of different elements there that we're talking about from other videos. But this is, I think, a good place to start. So I'm going to create my version of Space Invaders. Now, I've saved version of Space Invaders because obviously I'm not recreating the original, but also I'm going to be introducing a couple ideas of my own to make it a little different and to add some more interest and excitement to the game. So it'll be just my version of it. Um, you can certainly recreate elements from something else or start off by using some inspiration from something else, but you want to create it on your own. So next I'm going to just move on to our mood board. And we've talked about mood boards before. And I'm going to just start off by saying, okay, what elements am I going to need? So obviously, I have a spaceship. That is my spaceship. We need the aliens, so aliens or alien ships. We're going to need some sort of background, so space backgrounds. And while you're looking at it, maybe you'll want to figure out like your color scheme, right? And even another element that you want to consider is, what's your style going to be? Is it going to be more realistic, where you have actual space scenes that have actual like telescope photographs of space scenes? You want your spaceships to be more three-dimensional or more flat? Do you want your aliens to be, well, aliens or alien ships? And do you want those to be realistic or more, cartoony? So you got to figure out all these things. And so I'm going to make mine a little bit more flat. So like maybe flat illustration. Okay. So I have some ideas to go with. And so my next step, now that I have what I'm looking for, I'm going to go over here to just a Google search, and I'm going to type in spaceships, if I can type. And I'm going to go to images. And of course, it's going to give you everything. But I'm going to say maybe flat, flat design, maybe. And there it gives me a whole bunch. And, I like, a lot of different kinds that I'm seeing here. And remember, this is going to be more inspirational. This isn't necessarily going to use these. But which ones look cool to you? Something like this down here is, kind of a cool retro look to it. Some are more futuristic for sure. You can get some that look like ships from other genres. Like this one, almost has, a few of them have elements of like a Star Wars look. That's kind of an interesting shaped one. But I'm just going to say, for argument's sake, I like, something from, from this group here for mine. I kind of like how this one looks. So I'm not going to use this one, but I'm going to recreate something along that style. So I'm going to save this image, and I have it right here in a folder I created before. I'm just going to save it right there. So I want to come up with another one. So I'm going to do an alien spaceship. gives me kind of that, traditional flying saucer look. I like that this one has different styles because I'm going to be having multiple alien ships on the screen at once. So that might be a good one to use. Just quickly looking through here, these look a little too friendly. You want something to look not so much menacing, but clearly, something that I want to fight against. So actually, this one looks pretty good. I'm going to take this one and I'm going to save this one. Put it right in here. Let's see what's next on our list. We had backgrounds, right? So we're going to choose flat a space scene. Let's see what it looks like. And this kind of gets us in the right place. You look at, this one's a little bit, too CGI. A couple of these are a little too cartoony for what I'm looking for. But just scrolling through again, this is just for ideas. That one's not quite right. Something up at the top here wasn't too bad. Something like this is not exactly what I'm looking for, but it's close. And just scrolling down the related ones. That one's kind of cool. Yeah, so how about we do this one? So I'm going to just save this one as and put it right in my folder. We just drop everything in there. Just make sure we covered all our bases. We got our spaceship, our alien ships, background, and from that we can get our color scheme, certainly, pulling from this, so that if we have, say this bottom part here is where we have like our score and number of lives or anything like that, that's where we can hold all that information and we can pull the colors from up here. So maybe some nice reds, the lighter blues would probably stand out pretty well, these greens for sure. So when I'm looking for backgrounds, and if I'm going to use an actual background from one of these, I want to make sure I am looking at it with an eye towards areas that will hold the different parts of my game. So things like score and lives and that sort of thing. So you make sure that's at least a part of your thinking, so that makes it easier for you down the road. So now that we have our mood board, which you guys would collect all your images and color schemes and things like that, actually put those together to turn in, what we're going to do is move on to rules and instructions. Now, what I mean by rules and instructions, at least at this stage, is this is going to be the brainstorming part. And when we get to rules and instructions, which we'll talk about tomorrow in class about how to convert all this to rules that you would actually write out, this is kind of the place where you would take the ideas for how the game's going to actually function and work, and you translate that into just a couple of sentences talking out what it is that you're doing, so that you could then come to the code part and you can start writing that out in code. But you have the basically the sentences that describe what you're going to be doing already there. So first off, let's start with our spaceship. Okay. So how do we want that spaceship to move? Do we want it to be controlled by the X value of the mouse, so that as the mouse moves back and forth, it controls the ship? Or do we want to use arrow keys? Do we want to have have it be like a one-handed game where you move the mouse back and forth and you click with the left mouse button to fire, and so that's all a one-handed process? Or do you want to use two hands and use like space bar and arrow keys to move and fire? So I think, I'll make that decision now. For my game, I want it controlled by the arrow keys. So I'll just type that out. Spaceship controlled by left and right arrows. Okay, I'm not going to worry about having it twist and aim or anything like that. It's just going to move back and forth, and it's going to fire straight up. So we're going to have it be like that. Like I said, I'm going to have the laser controlled by the spacebar. So the laser controlled by spacebar fires straight up. And so as I'm looking at writing these out, I'm going to look at them later when I come to actually code the stuff. I'm going to know, okay, well, when I get to the code, moving it left and right, I go into that sprite for the spaceship. When left arrow is pressed, or if left arrow is pressed, move the sprite left 10 steps. Or if the right arrow is pressed, move to the right 10 steps, that kind of thing. So I'm already thinking, okay, this is helping me build up my structure for when I'm writing my code. It's going to make it really easy because I know that that's what I'm going to have to do. All right, so what happens? We got our aliens to deal with now. So how about if we're going to start it like the original game, it's going to have a row across the top of maybe 5 aliens, and they're going to just kind of be sitting there for a little bit, and they're going to just slowly get closer. They're going to move down closer and closer, and as it gets closer, there's going to be more aliens popping up behind them like this army. So we're going to slowly move down. So we're going to start off with 5 aliens at the top. So start with a row of 5 aliens. Oops, at the top of the screen. That will gradually move down every, we can set how fast they go. They're going to move down like a certain amount every, 2 seconds maybe. And this is something that can change. Obviously, once we're in there and we're trying this out, testing it, maybe 2 seconds is too fast. Maybe it's too slow. We'll have to kind of feel that out. And then maybe, just as a little note in here that, once you beat one level, maybe you go to level 2, and level 2, they move down faster. So we could say that each level, the aliens move down faster. So just little notes for yourself of how that might work. Okay, so we have our spaceship moving. We have, our laser being able to fire. We have a row of alien ships that are going to be moving down. What's next? We want to build on that. So we're going to spawn another row of aliens. Maybe after, it depends on how fast we're moving it down the screen, but say we have a row that takes, 2 seconds to move down, and then maybe that's only halfway. So maybe we move it down. So after 4 or 5 seconds, so let's say 5 seconds at the top of the screen. So maybe every 5 seconds, once the first row moves out of the way, that second row is going to spawn, and it's just going to keep doing that until you defeat everything. And now, depending on how big your aliens are and how big your screen is, maybe we decide how many rows maximum. Like, how do you know if you've won the game? They're not just going to keep coming. So maybe it would take 10 rows. So how would we do that? Just a note that says stop spawning after I'd say 10 rows, but each one's going to be their own individual sprite that's cloned. So what I think I might do is say 10 rows, and there's 5 per row. So after 50 clones. So that's just a little note for myself there. And that might help make it a little easier when I'm coding as well. All right, so how do we know how this is going to work? So what we're going to start with is we know our spaceship can slide, it can shoot, and what happens when the aliens get shot. So when a laser hits an alien ship, what's going to happen? Maybe when a laser hits an alien ship twice, the alien dies. That makes sense. You can make it as hard as you want or as easy as you want. If you want to use this one shot will kill the alien, that's great. 2 seems decent. You go 3. I wouldn't go much more than that if you're going to have them moving pretty fast. Otherwise, it's going to make you lose every time. But I think 2 is a decent one for this version of the game. But then, how do we know? One of the things I was frustrated with the zombie game that we were working on was that when a zombie would get hit, it would just kind of flash, right? And then it would still be there until it was hit 2 more times. So one of the things I thought what might be interesting is if I created a different costume for each of the ships. And so the first costume would be the normal state. And the second costume would be one that shows some damage. So I could either darken it with some scorch marks, or I could have pieces broken off of it or something. It's still there. It's still a threat until you hit it again, but it shows that some damage has been done. So right here, I'm going to just give myself another little note that says when it's hit once, change the costume to show damage. And I'm using terms in here like costume or spawn or clone or anything like that to kind of use some of the terminology that I would be thinking about when coding. Because obviously, a spaceship doesn't have a costume, but a sprite does. So it's not just change the costume to show damage. I could just say when it's hit once, show damage. But if I use the term change the costume to show damage, I know that's how the code in Scratch is looking at the behavior of what we want to happen. And so then when it's hit again, the clone is deleted. I know that that's the actual term, delete this clone is the actual term in the code. So it's helpful to use that. So we know what happens when we shoot an alien ship, but what happens if the aliens win, if they take over? So we'll add another note in here. So maybe, the aliens at this stage anyway, the aliens aren't shooting at us, but maybe once they land, once they get to the bottom of the screen or a certain Y value, remember the coordinate values of the game board, once it gets to a certain Y value, then it basically means they've successfully invaded, and so therefore the game is over. So we'll say if an alien lands, and it could be just one or it could be a whole row, but once any of the aliens land or get to a certain Y value, then game over. You could also set one to, if you successfully kill all 50 aliens, you win. Because remember, you have to decide how you win. That's a big part of the game too. So how you win, how you lose. And that would be a fairly successful game. I mean, obviously we need to keep score. So maybe, keep score would be a part of that. So maybe keep that in there. So we'd have to display that somehow. But then, how do we make this a little bit more interesting? It's like, I don't want to just have one type of way to kill these aliens. Maybe there's another way we can do that. And so I thought about it a little more, and I thought maybe what if we had asteroids flying around at the same time? And the asteroids would just kind of fly through, across the screen from different places that's somewhat random. And maybe they're coming at different angles and things that maybe the aliens can avoid those. They can maneuver around them and stuff. So if they get touched by one of the asteroids, it's not like they're really getting hit. But maybe if I, as the player, shoot one of those asteroids, it'll explode and you'll get a bunch of shrapnel or something like that that will then take out, all the aliens within a certain radius of the explosion, or at least it will make them damaged, if I haven't hit them already. So let's do that. So maybe we have asteroids will spawn, if I can type. maybe from either side. I'm just going to go left to right at different angles. So spawn from either side of the screen. And I'm going to have them come at random Y values at, to a random, another random Y value. So they'll move from left to right or right to left. They're not going to go straight down. They're not going to be at risk of hitting me at all. So their asteroids are going to spawn from either side of the screen at random Y values to, and move to random Y values on the other side. Okay. Maybe I say it's going to take, I don't know, half a second to travel. And I might say that the asteroids spin to add visual interest. There we go. So as these things come out, they're going to be coming randomly from different sides. They're going to spin. Weird angles, keeps things a little more interesting. So maybe we don't want these to happen right at the beginning when the game starts. So maybe we say wait 1 minute before spawning first asteroid. And we want this to be a regular feature, but we don't want our advantages to always be available. So maybe clone a new, or spawn a new, double tapping letters today, a new clone every 10 to 15 seconds. Okay, so it's a little bit random. There's some delay, and that's always good. And then what happens if you hit an asteroid? With the laser, it explodes and acts like a hit on any alien ship within a certain radius. I don't know how big that's going to be until we actually get to the development phase, but maybe within 50 pixels or 100 pixels. So maybe 50 to 100 pixels pixel radius. That's what I was going to write. And so that will help, because you could take out maybe 5 or 4 or 5 different ships with one asteroid hit. So it can give you a distinct advantage. And then, so that kind of like gives me an idea of all the different pieces I might be looking for the game. And I think it gives me a sense of what needs to be coded to make it happen. And as I was looking at this and thinking about it, I was making sure that the things I was telling it to do were things that I already had a good idea of how to make it work, based on other games that we've worked on, other things I've seen. So I'm not making it overly complicated for myself. I mean, there's a lot that's going to be going on, but it's certainly not going to be so much that I'm going to feel overwhelmed by it. Because really, it comes down to controlling the spaceship, the aliens, the fire, the laser fire, and some asteroids. And a lot of these things are clones. They're going to be things that you program once, and it's going to kind of work for itself, kind of like the zombie game did. So I think it's going to get us there pretty well. So what we're going to do is next time we're going to take a look at these rules and instructions that we just set up, and we're going to actually look at how we can turn that into a rule book. The game does need to be developed still, all that, but I'm going to talk about how we can take what we've written down as our ideas and see how we can make these rules and instructions make sense to your average reader who's not going to be coding, because they're not going to understand, a certain Y value, as being a phrase that makes sense to just a random player. So we're going to take a look and see how we can make all this, look pretty, make it flow really nicely, so a random user will know how to make sense of how to play this game, because they may not know you have to use the arrow keys instead of the mouse to control it. They might not know that you have to press the space bar to fire, even though that's a pretty common thing. So tomorrow we're going to look at how we can convert this into something that is visually appealing and also easy for the player to read. And we're going to use either Google Docs or maybe even Google Slides in order to make something that looks nice and has some formatting and layout options that will make it look better too. So that's the bulk of this particular part of the session. Just as a reminder for moving forward, with 3 weeks left until this is due, make sure that you are reading all of the instructions for each of the individual parts. It is 1 grade for all 5 parts together as a whole, so make sure you're answering all of those and getting those completed. The other thing is this week I will be writing up a rubric and placing that in the assignments as well, so that you have access to my grading system for this particular project. Expect that each of those 5 elements is going to factor in as a category in that rubric. So that is going to help guide you a little bit in how to make this happen. I had a question from this morning where somebody asked if they could use a game that they developed for one of the previous assignments, or anything from a previous assignment for this particular project. And so if you created a mood board back in end of April, you can certainly use that same mood board for this project if this project fits with those elements of the mood board. Just remember, you have to turn it in again based on what the requirements are for this project. If you want to use the start of another project you created to be kind of the inspiration for this one, or to build off of it more, you can do that. Just remember, you got to make it your own. This is a project that really is meant to demonstrate your ability to come up with ideas and to make it work well, which is why I want to stress too that I know not everybody is an artist. I get that. There are lots of ways to create different objects. Use the sprites that are available, import PNG files that you can search for online that will give you some options. One of the things that I think is key here too is that the name of the class is graphics and gaming design. And so graphics is the visual part, game design is kind of the functionality part. So you got to make sure that this both looks good and it also functions. It's playable. So when you're done with the whole project, make sure it's in a place where it looks good and it's playable. It doesn't have to be like production ready, commercial game or anything like that. Make sure it's clean. Make sure things actually work the way they should. Try and work out all the bugs that you can to make it look as clean and clear as possible. And it actually works. Find the balance between making it work and making it look good, so that it's something that's actually playable down the road at the end. Be sure to look at Google Classroom for any updates in the stream, get all the information for the requirements for the project. And with that, we'll see you tomorrow when we're looking at how to create the rule book, whether in Google Slides or in Google Docs.